julep, julep.
Good evening. Wow, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Now, before we get started, I just want to make sure, are we all fully vaccinated, double masked, and we're all staying 6 feet apart? That's what I like to hear. Anyways, my name is Megan Rodriguez, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as the TPUSA chapter president here at Florida State University. Thank you. Our chapter here at FSU has been blown away by the response from the community for this event. So many people have been so kind and amazing. We would first love to thank FSU PD and other law enforcement, not only for their amazing work today, working to keep us safe, but also for their hard work and diligence, putting their lives on the line for us every single day. Of course, I cannot continue without thanking a few more instrumental people to our chapter. Thank you to our amazing volunteers who helped with us today. A huge thank you to our field reps, Noah Durham and Browning Sandusky. A huge thank you to the best e-board I could possibly ask for. And thank you to other TPUSA staff. You all have been there for us week in and week out. You all have been so supportive of our chapter and helped us grow to what we are today, willing to work with us in our ambitious goals. And most of all, thank you to Turning Point USA for giving us the resources and training to help us pull off an event of this size. If you are interested in starting a chapter, please check out the TPUSA table at this event or go to tpusa.com/getinvolved. We would love to help y'all get plugged in. Finally, we encourage y'all to attend the biggest event of the year, America Fest, this December in Phoenix, Arizona. In fact, under 3 lucky chairs tonight is a golden ticket that will get you free general admission to the event. These are events y'all do not want to miss. Again, thank you all so much for joining us this evening, and we will get started in just a moment.
Welcome to Turning Point USA's proudly hosted 2022 event, the Live Free Tour. Joining us on stage tonight, Charlie Kirk.
We are here to celebrate the greatest nation ever to exist in the history of the world. You, as a human being, have dignity. That you have a right to speech, that you have a right to organize, that you have a right to start a family.
They are the invaders. We are Americans, and we are going to win.
Let's get this started. Now, welcoming to the stage, Charlie Kirk.
Hello, everybody. Great to be here. Thank you. And thank you to our great Turning Point USA chapter. Give it up for them. They worked so hard putting this together. They did such a great job. Thank you, guys. I understand we have some friends outside as well. It's too bad. Maybe they're in the room, or maybe they'll be here later. Who knows? Nothing that we haven't seen before. Last time I was at Florida State University. Was anyone at that speech a couple years ago? Maybe a freshman or two? Yeah? That was the last speech I gave before all the lockdowns, actually. And that was a lot of fun. I remember we actually got a question at that event. Someone said, "Hey, Charlie, what do you think about this COVID thing?" And it turns out it just changed our entire society. Well, let me rephrase that. The way we reacted to it changed our entire society, which was one of the worst mistakes I think we've ever made as a country and as a civilization. So we'll talk about that. But I do want to address one of these flyers that they have, Kirk off campus, which is just hilarious. I've actually never heard that one before. But there's one part of it that I do want to focus on, where it says, Florida State University continues to platform far-right influencers like Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro. Love Ben, does a great job. These people invade our communities. That's what we're doing tonight. We're invading, is that right? Spread their misinformation and oftentimes get funding from the university to do it. This must change. Join us in protesting. Okay, but I want to talk about the misinformation thing, because that's such an interesting thing. Because you're starting to hear that more and more in our society right now, which is that people on the right are somehow purveyors of misinformation. And everything we do is rooted in facts and what's can be proven. And it's not misinformation that they're worried about or facts. It's facts they don't like. It's facts that they want to make sure that students don't hear, or opinions that are actually not going to be able to be presented. But while we're on the topic of misinformation, shouldn't we talk about actually who's been spreading the most misinformation over the last couple years? And I was thinking about some of the biggest stories kind of that have dominated the American news cycle. You remember for quite some time during the 2020 presidential election, there was, and again, here's just a good rule for life, like Exhibit A of why not to do crack cocaine. It makes you do really dumb things, like, I don't know, drop off your laptop at a laptop repair shop and forget to pick it up. And by the way, who uses laptop repair shops anymore? The whole thing's so bizarre. So Hunter drops off his laptop at a laptop repair shop, forgets to go pick it up, and then somehow it expires over a certain window, and the property becomes the computer repair shop, his laptop, and then he then gives it to Rudy Giuliani, and all of a sudden there's this laptop out there. And almost instantaneously, the media picked up a story that was complete and total disinformation and misinformation, which was that 50 intel experts came out and they said, this story is Russian disinformation. Remember this? Right in the midst of an election. And you might love Biden, you might hate Biden, you might say, I hate Trump, I love Trump, whatever, but that's cheating. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to all of a sudden come out using the media, social media, and intel agencies and say this is Russian disinformation because it's a story that you're afraid might actually impact the election results. And so who got held accountable for spreading that misinformation or disinformation? Nobody. They just kind of shrugged their shoulders. In fact, Mark Zuckerberg just recently came out in an interview with Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan is awesome. He's one of the last, I think, legitimate free speech liberals. I don't even know if he's a liberal, libertarian, whatever you want to call him. He's entertaining and smart and fun and actually hears other ideas, which is refreshing, where Mark Zuckerberg went on Rogan's show and basically said, yeah, the FBI made a special visit to Facebook headquarters and told us that we have to clamp down on this story. And so if you tried to share the Hunter Biden laptop story in the midst of the election season, which, by the way, contained, let's just say, some rather juicy and salacious details about not just Hunter's personal conduct, but the soon-to-be potential president of the United States doing business deals with our adversaries. And if you even talked about it on Twitter, you had your Twitter account suspended for spreading disinformation and misinformation. So you got to wonder, who's actually the ones that are spreading the misinformation in our country? Remember this story where they said that the the virus came from a bat in the Himalayan mountains. Remember that? They said, oh yeah, it's just kind of came from a random, wet market, is what they said. Well, now we know that it was from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. In fact, early in the pandemic and our reaction to the pandemic, if you dared even say that it came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, then you could have lost your social media account, and then you could be labeled as a disinformation artist. I see a pattern, and we're going to keep on going through this list, that sometimes when they go the hardest after disinformation, it actually tends to be one of the most truthful things that actually ends up needing to be discussed and to be spread and heard about. Another one that I think is really interesting and important was during the summer of 2020, during Floydapalooza, when we decided to destroy our entire country around a lie that America is systemically racist, which of course we're not. We're the least racist country ever to exist in the history of the world. We're a very decent country. We don't give ourselves credit for that. Is the mostly peaceful protest. And my favorite picture was CNN that was doing their news hit while the Wendy's behind them was burning. Like, yeah, it's mostly peaceful out there. Things are fine. And you extrapolate that through public opinion polls and what people actually thought. And it was this amazing kind of contradiction where the media was telling us everything was peaceful, everything was fine, or they said, oh yeah, protesting needs to be disagreeable. Who says it needs to be peaceful? When it actually became very clear that entire cities were burning down. And I can go through story after story, from how they mislabeled Kyle Rittenhouse to Nicholas Sandmann, to how they told us that the vaccines were going to prevent transmission and that it was 100% safe and effective. And you got to wonder, like, okay, so you guys are ones that are spreading misinformation, and here's the best way you respond to misinformation, is just, we're not going to shut you up and you don't shut us up, and then we're able to disagree and we're able to have dialogue. Because you guys are going to spread all this nonsense, but that's not what's happening here. What's happening is they label anyone on the American right that might have a difference of opinion. All of a sudden they say, we are now going to be able to use force and power to be able to stop your ability to speak. And so speech, and we take it for granted, and it's quickly disappearing in our country because there's two forms of censorship, and we'll talk about both of them tonight. One that happens internally, and one that happens internally, one that happens externally. Is the speech is the best way to be able to find out what is true and how you react to certain crises or things happening in your country or civilization. If you are not able to consume information that is accurate, if you're not even to say information that's accurate as you see things happening in real time, you're living in some form of a tyranny, period. And it's really interesting because the big censorship in this country is not just coming from the government. That's obviously happening with, the kind of intimidation of people on the right, from raiding Mar-a-Lago to raiding pro-life leaders across the country, the unprecedented weaponization of our government. But it's also happening where people say, Charlie, if I spoke out the way you do, I would lose my job. I'd get kicked out of class. I would get graded differently. I want to have a career. The biggest form of censorship in this country is you shutting up you. And it's people that say, I'm afraid to wear a MAGA hat to go to a grocery store. I'm sure we have some MAGA hat here. God bless you. Someone that has the courage to do that. Always somebody. There's always, that right front row. There you go. And there's always somebody. And but most people, they do it in quiet. And the question should be why. I mean, you could see kind of the apparatchiks outside. They obviously are unashamed, to spew their venom. And they have a right to do that. They have a right to, say whatever they want to say. And that's fine. But here's the thing, is that I'm confident, and you should be confident if you love liberty and freedom, we're going to beat those people. I mean, just look at them. Obviously, we're going to beat them. But all we need is an opportunity to speak. They know that if there's actually a marketplace of ideas, and you're allowed to have ideas spread, and people be persuaded, then that's a massive threat to the current status quo that they're trying to usher in. And you can go through topic after topic after topic after topic. And so I always find it chuckling when people kind of zero in on that misinformation thing. And that's not to say that people don't get things wrong. I do my best to try to correct things. You might get facts and figures that are off, and you should do your best to, kind of, oh, so that wasn't right, or that should be, focused on more. But no, you have entire narratives where there is a posture and an intent around things that are completely and totally fabricated. I'll give you another example. So a public opinion poll, they asked just, 1,000 adults in America, how many blacks do you think are killed by whites every single year? Okay? Or how many unarmed blacks do you think are killed by whites every single year? And the responses were like 1,000, 1,500, 70. Like, that's about the average of what people thought. When in reality, the amount of unarmed blacks killed by police officers or killed by white people is something like 40 people a year. Or if you just count police, it's about 18 people a year. How is it that you have people that believe it's 1,200 or 1,500, when in reality it's in the teens or the early 20s. It's because, well, the media is very, very good at making you believe that there's a problem that actually doesn't exist, much larger than it really is. It's this massive propaganda campaign that happens. Another great example is this, and this is the media fear-mongering propaganda campaign, is that during the height of COVID, asked American adults by political affiliation, what's the chances you think you're going to be hospitalized if you get the Fauci virus or the Chinese coronavirus? What is the likelihood? And registered Democrats or registered people on the left would say that there is a 50% chance that I will be hospitalized if I get COVID. In reality, it's 1 to 5%, depending on age. How is it that people would believe so firmly a 50% chance that you'd be hospitalized? It's because the misinformation artists, the center of the misinformation hub themselves, is they're designed to keep you fearful and ignorant and not understanding what's actually happening in the country. And I'm sure there's some people on the left here tonight. I'm glad you guys came. But we'll have dialogue and we'll have discussion, hopefully, and see where we agree and disagree. But it's very tempting to want to use power that you have to shut up people you don't like because you think they're super evil. Like, oh, there's never been anything like these right-wingers right now. We have to shut them up, and then, okay, over a period of time, let's say you shut every single conservative up. Do you think that all of a sudden the censors are just going to stop until they shut up you, until there's no disagreement on the left? I'll give you a great example, Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard, you might like her, you might not like her, you might agree or disagree. Where is there space in the American left right now for Tulsi Gabbard's opinion on foreign policy or wokeism? It doesn't exist. She's not allowed to even express those opinions anymore. She says it herself. She said there is no space for a classical liberal on the American left to be able to say that what we're doing in Ukraine is not exactly smart. We need to ask more analytical and, let's say deeper questions. And I think that it's really dumb to tell kids that men can become pregnant. Like, really basic stuff, right? That doesn't exist. And we learned this from the Russian Revolution and from kind of Bolshevikism, is that as soon as you use the power of censorship, it knows no limitations whatsoever. So it's tempting. Like, yeah, we got to shut those guys up. We have to be able to say that those people can't speak. Like, okay, and eventually it will come for you. And eventually, here's the thing, speech is inherently messy. You get all sorts of people that are characters that you might not like, things that, opinions that you might find reprehensible. But through a pattern of allowing people to speak, even with those things, is eventually over a period of time, the American people have to come to some approximation of what is best for them. That has always been the track record. The worst thing you could possibly do is then use the government and then private actors. And that's the other thing that I find so funny, is that one of the accusations that, the Students for a Democratic Society, SDS, says about Turning Point USA. They call us fascists, which is just hilarious. They don't really know what fascism is, but okay, what is a fascist? A fascist is someone that tries to use government force to collude with private interests for a very specific purpose. How is that not the American government going to Facebook and asking them to censor political opponents? How is that not an act of some sort of technocratic fascism? Of saying, we're going to go to Google and say that you must say that if you say certain perspectives or opinions, you're not allowed to have them. And so kind of putting all this together, I find it very comical and interesting every time people accuse us of misinformation. Not to say we get everything right. It's not to say that every opinion we have is popular, but the most prevailing narratives of the day are not rooted in truth, unfortunately, by the big propagandists. I want to close on a couple things, and we'll do some questions. I want to make sure we always save plenty of time there so that we can have a good conversation there. Look, our generation, I'm millennial, not Generation Z, and so I guess we could say our generation. I'll say your generation for all intents and purposes. By the way, I have to thank Generation Z. Finally, there's a generation boomers hate more than millennials. So I hear it all. It's really great. Congratulations. Finally. They said, those Generation Z, they're the worst. It used to be all millennials, the worst ever at all time. But this is kind of really more to the adults first and then to the students, which is I want to kind of focus on something I said earlier, which is we say that COVID did all these things. And even I'm a little sloppy in my language at times because I'm so used to saying it the way the regime says it, but it really was not COVID that hurt young people. It was our reaction to it. And every single metric, from weight gain to suicide to psychiatric drug medication to alcohol, all went in the negative direction during these lockdowns. And for what? It will go down as one of the worst mistakes ever made in decent society and in our civilization, all around kind of this prevailing dogma of mass propaganda and of fear. And now you have a generation that now, let's just pretend everything was fine health-wise, despite the fact that all of these things went up, anxiety, depression, mental health issues, all those things went up. let's just talk economically, our response to this. And this is where, I'm trying to warn conservatives that if we don't get actually a coherent message around these sorts of topics and these issues, the socialists are going to have quite a field day with the next generation, because when people don't own anything, they make for perfect socialists. And everything is twice as expensive, minimum, in every major metropolitan area over the last 2.5 years. And we did that. Both parties did that. Conservatives and liberals decided to go print a bunch of money we did not have to inject it into mass stimulus packages. Obviously, the current administration did it more than the prior one, but there's no doubt that it was a bipartisan agreement to go continue to inflate the currency and to basically create what is record inflation, where many of you in this room probably have a fair amount of economic cynicism, where you say, where exactly is this American dream that was promised to me? And honestly, you have a point. And I'm not one to play victim. I'm not one, or to say you should play a victim. I'm not one to say that young people should bash their adults or their elders, the adults or elders of their parents. But honestly, there needs to be a mass apology to Generation Z and to young people for what we did over the last 2 years, which was a drive-by shooting of a generation, and then we just say, oh, just go work harder. Actually, no. How is a young person supposed to go buy a home right now? How are they supposed to afford a mortgage with everything twice as expensive? And by the way, they could barely pay for basic goods and services, and then obviously, many of you are obviously in debt going to college, of which I have a lot of opinions around that we can get into if you want. And the essence is that this has been intergenerational robbery, the likes of which we have never seen. And just the message of, oh yeah, just go get your act together, go work together, that doesn't cut it. Now, for all you students out there, on the inverse, I implore you to reject just playing a victim and being cynical. It's still a beautiful country. There's still huge opportunity. You can still get through it with grit and hustle. There's been a lot of obviously bad things that have been dealt to you, and they were done by bad decisions and decisions by people that are not of your generation. Despite all of that, there's still there's an immense amount of wealth and happiness that you can have in your life with all of that. Through earned success and the proper application of your effort, there is still not in America a good reason to say, I'm just going to give up, I'm not going to do anything, I'm going to throw it all away. So I kind of put it on both sides, but honestly, I say this to adults all the time because, a lot of adults, now that the stock market has gone down dramatically, they're feeling a little bit more. But when I say adults, I mean, people of the age of 50, they'll say all the time, they say, this Generation Z is so cynical, and all they want is free stuff, and they're, 20 years old, and they want socialism because they don't want to work. I say that's some people, obviously, but honestly, the vast majority of young people find socialism attractive because they've been lied to their entire life. They went to go get a degree they know that is largely worthless, to go study stuff that doesn't matter, to go find jobs that don't exist. They've done everything they've been told. Go get the vaccine, go stay at home, go wear a mask, don't see your friends. And guess what? It has done complete generational carnage to the ones they love, including themselves. And so they look up at adults, they're like, oh, really? We just have to go work harder and apply more? How about you guys leave a country that's even a little bit free or prosperous for us? Because here's what's going to happen. If conservatives don't get our act together and we don't get more young people doing 3 very basic things, buying homes, getting married, and having kids, you're going to have a socialist revolution in this country, the likes of which you've never seen, and it's going to be very, very hard to stop. Because if a generation is increasingly not owning property, not getting married, and not having kids, what on earth are you supposed to tell them to go work for? What are they trying to conserve? They're going to say, you know what, let's just go take the money from adults. And that's going to be very hard to stop. It's a bad idea. I don't support it. It's morally questionable at best. I don't find it to be supportive at all. But if for those of you that actually want a free enterprise to exist and to survive in the future, you have a generation that is being completely priced out of the housing market, and then you have these massive Wall Street firms coming in like BlackRock, and what are they doing? They're buying up single-family homes across America to turn you into lifelong renters, to make it so that you can never actually buy into the housing system, to be able to build equity and to build wealth. And boy, that's not a country that is sustainable. One of the things that actually creates, I think, de-radicalized politics is when people own stuff. People that own homes tend to not burn down Wendy's. Good rule for life, right? People that are married and have kids tend to not go march in the streets endlessly against systemic racism. They got other things on their mind. But you have the least married generation. We have a population collapse that is down 20 to 30%. And this increased kind of aura of cynicism. And I hate to be too big into the materialism because I think we have a spiritual crisis in our country as well. But when a generation works super hard, and there's a lot of you that work hard, you work minimum wage jobs, you study, and you're getting poorer, that creates a lot of nihilism, a ton. When all of a sudden you're working a job just to stay poor. You're like, why don't I just go get government benefits? Like, it would be easier. And that's not an exaggeration. I'm sure in Tallahassee, this has not been immune from inflation. But in many of the metropolitan areas, people that are 25 to 35, they're working extra hours, they're putting more time in, and it's not even enough to stay out of debt. In fact, the recent study shows that 30% of Gen Z/millennials are going to have to go into debt this calendar year just to pay for basic needs, groceries, and rent. And so over a period of time, what's going to prevent them from then supporting the Bolshevik Marxist that says, you know what, let's just go take it from the most productive because you've been scammed? Now, I don't support the conclusion. I think there's some prudent steps we could take to actually restore this stuff, but man, we did this to ourselves. And if we just think it's going to autocorrect or self-correct by doing the same things we've been doing the last 20 or 30 years, I think that's sadly mistaken. I'm sure we could actually agree with some of the people on the left in this room, but here's where we'll probably disagree with some of the people on the left, or maybe we'll agree or not. It depends on where you're coming from. Is that there is still a purposeful life ahead of you. Is that there's so much that could still be done of getting married and having a wonderful and beautiful life. It's just going to take some proper steps from our leaders to actually care more about your generation. I could say our generation, but I'll say your generation than the people of Ukraine. Because if you ask me, sending $70 billion to Ukraine is an insult to every single one of you that is going into debt to go pay your rent, while our citizens and your generation is working harder than ever, can't even put food on the table, and is going into a nihilistic, cynical tornado. And we're like, well, we need to go send Zelensky another $70 billion. And then Zelensky comes out and he demands money from us. Like, okay, pal, how about you sit this one out? How about we go put our students first that are working their tail off, that have been lied to go get degrees that really don't matter, that are never actually going to make them learn anything substantive. Maybe you guys are learning wonderful things all the time, and you could tell me that later. But vast majority of students that graduate say they wish they wouldn't have gone at all if it wasn't for just getting a piece of paper in return. And I think it's long past time for a realignment of priorities in more ways than one. And I sure hope our leaders start to listen. Okay, let's do some questions, guys, and thank you for sitting through that. And so we could do a line. Where are we doing the line? We're doing a line right over here? Okay, cool. And we could turn up the house lights slightly, okay? Okay. So just some ground rules for the questions. Try to keep it to a question. I might want to have a dialogue back and forth, and that's fine. If you disagree, you guys can go to the front of the line. I think it's generally a conservative audience here tonight, so please don't heckle or boo or treat somebody poorly if they say something you find objectionable. Let it be known at Turning Point USA events, if you disagree, you're given a platform, and we could figure out what to do about that. I challenge every single left-wing organization and group to do the same. Okay, let's start here.
Oh, hey, Charlie. Thank you for being here in Tallahassee today. So I'm the president of the new Turning Point USA chapter at Tallahassee Community College.
Awesome.
And we've been struggling recently to get some recognition by the faculty and the leadership of the school, obviously. Kind of an uncooperative administrative body, you could say. So I was just wondering if you had any tips for helping us gain the trust of those teachers and school leaders who could potentially help us launch our student group while still keeping to our conservative America First values.
That's awesome. Well, first of all, thank you for your commitment and your leadership. You should be applauded for that. That's awesome. And look, it's going to take grit and hustle. You got to find a faculty sponsor. Not easy, right? I'm sure there's one. And if you can't find one, at least try to find one person that you might disagree with that still believes in freedom of speech, that like, hey, you at least believe that something that you might not agree with has a right to exist on campus. But honestly, this is all a very good exercise for you. And I just want to encourage you personally. The difficulty, the opposition, navigating a community that might not agree with everything that you hold is going to make you a tougher, more resilient person throughout your entire life. Just having everything easy when you are young creates a lot of misery. It does. And I have a whole theory about this, which is that young people are the most comfortable generation in history, which is why they're the most depressed generation in history. There's a great book called Comfort Crisis. You guys should check it out, by Michael Easter, which makes this argument that we as a human species, we're not designed just to be able to sit around all day and have 3 meals in perfectly air-conditioned, climate-controlled situations. Over a period of time, it actually creates a lot of anxiety and depression. And so opposition is a good thing. I would consider that to be a blessing. At the same time, we're happy to give you resources and help in any way possible. And I'm positive you'll be able to find hopefully a sponsor or two throughout it. But look at it as a blessing. Look at it as almost a metaphorical muscle building opportunity, so that later in life you will have gone through, being called nasty names, not being in the majority, and eventually you'll be stronger because of that. Okay? God bless you. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Charlie. Thank you for coming. I'm a part of the exec board for the Turning Point USA chapter at FSU, so
Awesome.
we really appreciate having you here.
Thank you for all your hard work. Great job.
Well, thank you for coming. I just have a quick question for you. What is your advice to young adults who are in relationships with a significant other who has opposing political views?
Yeah, great question. So obviously everyone is free to make their own choices. I think that is a recipe for disaster. I do. And I'm not saying break up with that person. I'm not saying you can't have a nice time. But here's a good question. Eventually, you might have children. Let's pretend you have children with that person, okay? Whose values are you going to teach the kid? Right? Who gets the, not you, I'm just saying, I'm just asking more hypothetically. What kind of school do you send the kid, right? Do you send it to a public school and government school or to a Christian school? And who decides then? And then over a period of time, when you start living for a year or 2 or 3 years together, and all of a sudden, the news comes on, and tension's already high in the house. Are you going to be able to discuss the nightly news politely and wonderful together? Are you going to see it all in the same way? What about charitable giving? Are you going to want to give to the same charities? I could go on and on and on and on. And I've seen it work every once in a while. I've seen people with opposing views build really beautiful lives and do great things, but I've seen it be a disaster more times than not. That doesn't mean, by the way, if you find someone that shares your views, that it's going to be the most wonderful thing ever. But if you want to have children, then I believe firmly you have to marry somebody or be with someone that sees the world the same way you do. Or else it's not fair to the child. Or else they're going to be having competing and confusing narratives and dialogues passed down to them at all times. And so do what you will with that, but I also have seen a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to change them. That's not a good idea. That usually doesn't work. And by the way, if you are in a relationship to change somebody, that's really not what a relationship is, right? Typically, people that go into a relationship with the intent of transforming the other, that ends like the Hindenburg. God bless you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh boy. Okay. I'm liberal, Mr. Kirk. I mean, okay, I voted Trump in the 2020 election, but...
Oh, good. You're not that liberal.
Okay, but things changed my mind. But anyways...
Okay.
I'm young, obviously, and I was wondering about trickle-down economics. I was wondering, when is it going to trickle down for me? Because historically, I've never personally seen it. Like, for example, Liz Truss she resigned over the dumb tax things. George Bush said it was voodoo economics. So my question to you is, would trickle down, or when is it going to trickle down?
Yeah, I'm not a defender necessarily
Really?
of trickle-down economics. I think in some ways, if you want to talk about supply side versus demand, here's the thing. I used to be a really, economic libertarian, and then I grew up, and you start to see that you actually need, some checks and balances and externalities in the market. I am a big defender of the market, though, generally. So how should we approach economics? I suppose that's a question, right? And so here's how I'll answer that, which is that an economy should serve people. People should not serve the economy. Okay, I think you and I could both agree with that. And so I will defend, though, the idea of giving tax cuts to businesses. That's a very good idea, because businesses are run by people, and businesses employ people. Now, should you only give them to big businesses? No, I think that's silly. But the vast majority of businesses in America are small businesses run by entrepreneurs. And so, for example, my entire economic viewpoint is to make you more empowered and easier for you to be able to start a business and grow a business from something to nothing. So you can call it whatever you want. You can call it free market economics, entrepreneurship-focused economics, whatever it is. But I think you and I could find some common ground on some things. For example, I think it's wrong and it's stupid and it's silly that the largest corporations in America don't pay anything in income tax, whether it be Amazon or ExxonMobil. It's not fair, it's not right, and I think a lot of these loopholes are designed to be able to favor the corporate lobbyists in Washington, D.C., while everyday people get completely and totally crushed. And I'm a conservative saying this. Do you want to chime in really quick?
Oh yeah, I agree with you. I am not a big fan of bailouts. Like during the COVID pandemic,
I was against it. Yeah.
Yeah, the airline industry had to be bailed out by the American people, and I don't think that's right. If you have to shut down for a week and your whole business collapsed, like
It's probably not a sustainable business.
Yeah, it's not a sustainable business. That's your fault. It's not for you to take the wealth of the American people and just put it back to your company.
So let me say one last thing I think that hopefully we can agree on. And this is where I'm probably in the most harmony with libertarians, okay? Which is what we are doing to our currency is immoral and wrong and has been warned for multiple decades and generations by people in the kind of libertarian community, and it makes every single person in this room poorer, and it makes the oligarchs, and it makes the people that run our society richer. A hyperinflated currency benefits people that already have hard assets that are able to move money quickly. Working people get crushed by inflation. And so let's put trickle-down economics aside. Let's say this. We need to have a monetary policy that does not destroy the value of the dollar 10% year over year so that everyday people can save and with expectations so that they all of a sudden don't have to say, well, I'm going to get 10% poorer this year. You know what ends up happening? People end up spending all their money on stupid stuff because you have just created mass economic cynicism. They say, what's the point in saving? What's the point in going into the market? It's just going to crash. And so I think you and I could both agree that from a monetary standpoint, we should encourage saving over spending and restore the purchasing power of the American muscular middle class.
I
God
agree.
bless you, man. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey, Charlie. So I used to be a conservative. I no longer am now. I'm actually a libertarian now. And a big reason for that is what I see as a contradiction within conservatism between supporting freedom, freedom of speech, to bear arms, and support for law enforcement. Because if the government were to infringe on our freedoms even more than it already has, such as banning assault rifles, for example, then the police would be the ones to enforce such tyrannical edicts, as the Canadian truckers discovered. So is there a contradiction here for conservatism? Why or why not?
Very smart question. I can see where you're coming from. So the way I would answer it is that we look at the FBI a lot differently than a local sheriff. So local sheriffs have been the ones defying all of these kind of gun-grabbing regulations and measures, because the sheriff is probably someone in your local community you trust, probably someone that got elected publicly, probably someone whose kids goes to the local school, and almost always is a strong adherent to the Constitution. What I think you are yielding towards is something you and I could have a lot of agreement with, which is it's the FBI, the ones that take the knee for BLM, the ones that are calling for mass gun control. Do I trust them? Absolutely not. But do I think that local police is not just important but necessary for human flourishing? Absolutely. And so I'm a localist with this stuff. I think that the less federal control when it comes to a lot of these issues, the better. I question so much of the legitimacy of what the FBI is doing recently, and it pains me to say that as an American patriot, where I look at everything they do through a political lens now, from raiding Mar-a-Lago to spying on Donald Trump to the raiding of the homes of pro-life leaders. So your apprehension as a new libertarian is totally right. But I would just challenge you to be like, hey, that's a lot different than Sheriff Mark Lamb, for example, in Arizona, who is elected by the local people and doing everything he possibly can to go after smugglers and would never enforce a gun confiscation measure. And so we need to support our local police. Very, very important. They're in our community. They're one of us. Where the FBI is, though, I look at them as almost kind of infantry for the regime. Does that make sense?
Well, it's that, police, whether federal, state, or local, they're tasked with upholding, all the laws of the United States of America, federal, state, and local. So if the federal government were to, for example, pass a law that banned assault rifles, then wouldn't the local police then be compelled to enforce that law? Is that not something that
That's a
concerns
good question. We've already seen, though, a track record and a pattern of local police and sheriffs, hundreds, saying, I will not enforce any of these. Montana, for example, okay, came out through every one of their sheriffs and said, we're not going to enforce an assault rifle ban. We will ignore the federal government. So I would just challenge you to kind of look at some of that at how some of these more local law enforcement agencies are already vocalizing that they are willing to say we are not going to enforce an unconstitutional measure from the federal government. But your apprehension is well-founded. I don't consider it a contradiction. I consider it a nuance and an important difference. But I think you would also agree you need some form of law enforcement, and I would much rather be policed by people that live in our communities, that are close to us and share our concerns, than somebody far off in a distant land. And I'll close with this. The left does not want to defund the police. They want to destroy local police and replace it with a national police force. And so you and I can definitely have agreement that a national police force is horrifying. It's something we do not support. I want thousands of local sheriffs that are accountable to the people, and far less federal involvement kind of parachuting into our communities telling us what to do.
Thank you for your time.
God bless you, man. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Trevor Waller, and I just had a question. Why do you think that leftists and liberals and people on the left side, or why they push anti-science ideas in our school systems? Like, they push the ideas where it's like, a man can be a woman can be a man, there is no difference between genders, and why parents accept that? And then one last question, what do you think we should do with public school systems? Should we try to change them? Should we take kids out of the public school system, homeschooling? Because I'm a homeschooler. Just
Awesome.
wondering what you thought.
Yeah, great. So why do parents put up with it? That's a mystery to me. I think that's changing, though. I think parents are starting to push back. I think there is kind of a default setting of being polite in a lot of these communities, and parents don't want to come across as being impolite. So why do they teach things that are contrary to science? Yeah, that's a really important and good question. They would disagree with how you just categorized it, even though it is, science in and of itself. But they also have a different view of what science is. I gave a whole speech on this in Kansas City that I encourage you to check out, which is science properly understood should be about the preservation of human life and the advancement and the flourishing of human life. Science, like I would say, improperly applied, is about exerting your own will and dominion over nature to show supremacy over the design, or let's just say the state of what nature is. I'll give you an example, right? So two forms of medical technology that could be used by the same person for two complete and total differences, okay? An abortion and a C-section. One gives life and protects life, and one destroys life. They're both instruments of science, because if you look at a test tube, you're not going to find morality in a test tube. So you have to bring some form of morality into science, right? This is one of the great lies, I think, of secularists. So they say, oh, you can find morality in science. No, at some point you have to have some sort of a construct and a framework, right? These are tools that you use, right? And so with that kind of advancement of technology, praise God, we have C-sections in America, right? It's the most commonly performed surgery in America that has saved millions of pregnancies and babies that otherwise we don't know would have happened. But then you have abortion, very similar procedure in the way a trained technician has to do that, but a completely different result. And so the question really needs to be, what is science? What is the point of science? I believe science should be first and foremost an inquiry into the natural world, understanding it. And if we have to intervene, if we have to create something new, it has to be under the moral framework of allowing human beings to flourish and to succeed. Your question about the public schools, look, I'm a local guy. If local areas want to have public government schools, so be it. But I think we have to abolish the Department of Education in Washington, D.C. I think we have to restore parents' rights to be able to have school choice and vouchers. And let me just say, you have a very, very good education program here in Florida. You're very lucky. Other states would give a lot to be able to have the type of educational mobility you have here in Florida. God bless you, man. I love homeschoolers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And if you guys disagree, you could come to the front. Just want to make that known. No pressure. So.
Hi, my name is Sarah. My parents got divorced when I was a toddler. I have no memory of them together. I'm 21 years old right now, and I got married this past April.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's phenomenal. That's thrilling.
So I've never had a good role model in terms of, marriage with my parents. So I was wondering, what would your best advice be for having a long, happy marriage?
So I've been married a year and a half, so I don't know about long or happy. Well, I know about happy, I don't know about long. So don't know about long. So, but we're working on the length. So look, I mean, it's not about you. That's the most important thing that you'll learn really quick. It's about service. It's about, commitment to the other. And this is the thing I always laugh about, when people say men and women are the same. When you're married for like an afternoon, you realize men and women are very much not the same. Right? And so, I mean, a great example is, when a man comes home from work, there could have been a nuclear explosion at work. How was work? It was fine. It was good. where the wife just will talk about every single detail. That it's just the nature, right? It's completely different. And then, Dennis Prager has a really great speech on this that drives the left crazy, which is that men's nature is towards variety, okay? And I think it's very important for wives to just say to their husbands, thank you for being loyal to me. It's a very important thing. A lot of men don't hear that enough, and it drives some women like, I don't want to have to say that. It's like, well, just study a little bit about men's nature and understand how men are kind of programmed towards variety. It's a very important thing. The final thing is just carve time for one another. And I'm a big believer in the 10 Commandments. I believe the Sabbath is one of the great gifts from God to be able to preserve the family. I think the Sabbath, properly understood, is the preservation of the family. And so I turn my phone off every Friday night, turn it back on Sunday morning. I'm unreachable by the world, and you just have to focus on another person. The last thing I'll say is this, is social media and phones will do everything it possibly can to get in the way of your marriage. So do what you can to put those aside, silence them, and I wish you a very, very long and happy marriage, and hopefully children sometime soon. And I fully support young people getting married early. I think that's a very important thing. Now, the reason, and people say, well, it's a risk. Why can't I wait till I'm 28 or 30? Because what if it's not the right? Everything in life is a risk. Okay, everything has a risk. But there's also another risk that you have to acknowledge, which is the risk of our thousands of listeners that email me, and they say, I'm 35 and I haven't found anybody, and it's too late. That's a risk too. And I can tell you right now, the risk of having guilt or having despondency or having just kind of regret, that's the better word. That's a risk that some people need to know just as much as the risk of you might not be able to go to Paris every summer. And so I don't think we communicate that all the time to young people. So God bless you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
What's good, Mr. Kirk? So I'm not sure how up to date you are with what's been going on with Kanye West and his interview with Tucker Carlson.
Very hard to keep up with it.
Yeah, it's a lot. His interview with Tucker Carlson and Cuomo and the podcast. But I was wondering, what are your thoughts on what he had to say about the media and politics in general, and in specific, what are your thoughts on him and Candace Owens in the White Lives Matter T-shirts?
Love it.
Also, do you believe that, do you believe that Donald Trump was a good president? Why or why not?
Okay, that's a lot of questions. Let me start with the easiest. I wrote a whole book saying Trump was a good president, so yes, definitely believed that, and he was a great president economically, American strength, energy independent, all that sort of stuff. So I wrote a whole book on that. So I will answer the most controversial part of the question intentionally because it's important that people are honest. So I don't love the way what Kanye said, but I do not think that Kanye is an anti-Semite because I'm a behaviorist. And I have never seen Kanye ever treat someone who is Jewish without respect or honor or decency. That's a very important thing, which is, okay, should he have said what he said? That's debatable and questionable. However, the outrage from people to cancel him and to throw him out the window, I ask the question is, how has he treated people that are Jewish? And across the board, he's treated them very well. So that says a lot. Before you start all of a sudden going to the rafters and saying he's the worst person ever because of what he said, and I think it could have obviously been worded differently. I had the opportunity to spend some time with him, over a summer, and that was a whole whirlwind of time. That was back in 2018 or 19, and I found him to be an incredibly decent and loving father. And so I think a lot of these character slanders and smears against him are wrong and awful, and from people that have never met him. So that was kind of the first answer to that. The second thing is he's undoubtedly one of the most talented artists of a generation. His communication style is not for everyone. He says things that people don't like. Okay, that happens a lot in life. Stop taking yourself so seriously. Instead, understand this is someone who's worth multiple billions of dollars that is now speaking out against a couple things. What he calls a genocide in the black community, which is regular abortion. That's a very serious thing he's speaking out against. And he's also talking about liberating this idea that you must believe a certain thing because of your skin color. So I support the White Lives Matter shirt because white lives do matter, all lives matter, and the outrage from the kind of collective media I think was rather insane. So, do you have a follow-up with that?
No, that was pretty much it, but I think you're a great orator and appreciate the answer.
God bless you, man. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Hello, Charlie. Thank you for being here today. My name is Ari Daljan. I am a freshman political science major at Florida State. My question is going to be about two things you've said tonight. Our leaders stepping up for us and the freedom to make our own choices. But first of all, I want to ask why the orange branding? We're in Tallahassee, not Gainesville.
Oh, that's it. So in all fairness, it is the national branding. So every tour stop gets the orange shirts.
Okay.
That's a fair question, I have to say. It is.
Okay.
But for the record, I have spoke more at Florida State University than at the University of Florida. So let's just be clear. Okay?
So I think my question is going to be a lot different than other people, especially people who disagree with you. I am one of them.
Okay.
I'm going to throw you, Candace Owens, and Ben Shapiro into the same category. Three people who are mainstream to the modern conservative movement. All three of you, host podcasts. You go to colleges and host events like these. And I'm sure you know that there are a lot of moments where people come up, try to challenge you, and you end up, I guess I would say, winning an argument, and it ends up getting posted on social media, and people say, oh, Charlie Kirk owns the libs. But at the end of the day, I don't think that, trying to win an argument is a win for either of us, because even though we have these events, our politicians still continue to screw our lives over every day. And you were talking about our leaders stepping up for us.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you, and let's say Candace Owens or Ben Shapiro were to also hear my question, is that why have neither of you or any of you considered running for political office? And I just want you to know that I wouldn't vote for you because I disagree with you guys on nearly everything, but I think you guys would win because obviously, because obviously, you guys are very good at marketing. You have huge platforms. Instead of, coming here debating against college students who all three of you have a clear advantage over because you have more life experience, why don't you debate the politicians who we are all critical of and actually make the laws in order to right their wrongs?
Well, two things. I'm happy to debate anybody. I debate college professors if they want to come on the show. I'll debate AOC. She's welcome anytime on my program. I'll have a long debate with Rashida Tlaib or Ilhan Omar, Hillary Clinton, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. I think Candace Owens and Ben would also agree, or Matt Walsh or Michael Knowles, kind of all of us in the same sort of team, if you will. We'll have a conversation with anybody as long as it's in good faith. Now, the reason we're here on college campuses and we take open questions, and I don't think it's debating, I think it's like just respectful disagreeing, and if someone really gets heated, then yes, we are going to kind of ramp up the temperature and kind of just show the world kind of the proper way to have dialogue. But look around in the room, and I think that if by show of hands, do you think that most of the professors on campus are conservative or liberal? They'd probably say it's mostly liberal on campus, and they're hearing mostly liberal. So we're here to hopefully broaden the intellectual and ideological diversity on campus and to do something that's actually more important than running for office, which is to give so many young people here the confidence and the courage and the reminder that they're not alone and that there's other people that think the way they do on campus, and to be able to give them a community and network. And so I think your question's in good faith, right? I'm not here to, just obviously I've been doing this for 10 years, and so if someone has a disagreement, we'll have fun back and forth. At the same time, though, I think it's important that from some people who see our campus interactions, forget winning or losing the debate, I think it's really helpful for the hundreds of millions of people that have seen our videos or views over the last couple of years to kind of see what it's like to have two ideas collide in real time without scripting of cable TV. I think that's exciting and helpful for people, right? For example, if I asked you, do you think men can become pregnant?
I don't think you asked me that.
Well, I'm just asking you. Do you think men can become pregnant?
I don't think so.
Okay, good. So we agree. So you're not a leftist, you're a liberal. And that's important for people to see. And I think there's value and merit in that. So thank you, men. Appreciate you being here tonight.
Good evening, Charlie. My name is Martin Walker. I'm the vice president of the chapter at TCC.
Awesome.
From my understanding, you wrote a book. You had mentioned that college was not for everyone.
Yes.
And getting a degree for me, it's not the end of the world. I just want to be successful. I just want to, me personally, I want to get more politically active or involved in politics. How would someone like myself go about doing that?
Great question. So a degree in politics means next to nothing, right? If you want to get into politics, no one's going to care about where you went to school. Politics is the closest thing to a pure meritocracy of any industry you'll ever see. It's, are you going to show up early at precinct committee meetings? Are you going to make the phone calls? Are you going to drive halfway across the state for an event with 15 people? Are you going to be a body man to a state rep and, kind of help them out really when they need it? And so basically, if you want to make it in politics, you have to do the gritty hustle work for years, and eventually you'll get a shot to move up. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely. I can make the effort.
then you're going to succeed in politics. I mean, so at Turning Point USA, we have an amazing staff, 250 people, and our Turning Point USA staff is a majority of them started as Turning Point USA chapter leaders, doing the nitty-gritty work, and then got internships, and then started to work their way up through the ranks. And so we love people that dedicate themselves and work really hard, and kind of in the political space, it's a place where you could be really significantly rewarded by doing that. So
Absolutely. Thank you.
God bless you, man. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Kirk. My question is not for myself, but it's from my brother, actually.
Okay.
He's a huge fan.
An
So
outsourced question, sure.
I've gotten permission to record your response. So if it's okay with you, I'll read his question to you, and then I'll start recording.
Yep.
And then if you could say, like, I don't know, hi, Brendan, or something, that'd be pretty cool.
Is his name Brandon or Brendan?
Brendan.
Brendan. Ooh, I was going to
So
say let's go
close, I know.
Brandon, but
You can say let's go, Brendan. He'd like that, too.
let's go Brendan.
Okay. All right, so here's his question. Who would you like to see in office for president in 2024? Is it Trump or DeSantis?
Yeah,
If so, who would it be and why? And if not either of them, who would you like to see in office and why?
I've received this question at every tour stop, and so I do encourage people to watch it, but I'll give you the same answer I've given everywhere. And hi, Brendan, how are you? Good. Let's go, Brendan. Look, I've said this is speaking personally, not on behalf of Turning Point USA or Turning Point Action. I've said this. If Trump runs again, I'm going to back him again. I'm a loyal guy. I can't stand in politics where people say one thing and do another, or they're all of a sudden very wishy-washy. With all that being said, with that kind of pretext, I'm a massive Governor DeSantis fan. I think he's amazing. I think he's done such a great job for the state of Florida. Governor DeSantis very well might be a once-in-a-generation leader that we're looking for. I have looked far and wide for a reason not to like Governor DeSantis, and he has been incredible. Now, I'll close with this on this question. I think Governor DeSantis would make a phenomenal president. I know Trump made a great president. And so I know that getting him another 4 years would make us energy independent again, would get this entire Ukrainian mess figured out, would get our economy roaring again, would secure the southern border, would restore confidence of the nation in a way that's very profound, would get CRT out of our military, wokeism out of our schools. That's enough for me to be able to say, hey, you earned the right to another 4 years, especially after all the nonsense and the shenanigans that happened in the 2020 election. Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, man.
Thank you, Mr. Kirk. Have a good one.
Hi.
Hello.
Given the concerns you've expressed about censorship and interference with free speech, I wonder how you view the laws in Florida and other states that restrict what professors can teach about racism in the classroom. I mean, obviously you disagree with the doctrines you teach, but why, would you extend to them the same right to free speech that you advocate for everybody else?
No, I mean, it's a matter of curriculum, right? So I would ask a question, should we teach the flat earth theory in physics, right? Should we teach bloodletting in biology? Should we teach lobotomies in medical school? Or should we teach eugenics in ethics? No, there's some ideas that are so reprehensible and provably wrong, they shouldn't be in anywhere close to an academic environment. Now, a professor obviously has the freedom of speech to say what he or she wants individually, but from a curriculum standpoint, from what you're able to measure or test, to say that all of a sudden we're going to teach that race matters, that somehow that people are suffering from a pandemic of whiteness, as Coca-Cola would say, or just critical theory or critical race theory, no, that has no place in an educational environment, because in an educational environment, it's less about really the opinion of the teacher or the opinion of the student. It's the pursuit of the soul and the entire being of the student towards truth, goodness, and beauty. And so you must have a teleological destination for that. Yes, a follow-up.
Just one follow-up, which is, so you would say that the idea that there's systemic racism in this country is as off base as the idea that the earth is flat and as provably wrong as the idea that the earth is flat?
Yes, I mean, I would ask you, how are we systemically racist?
Well, I mean, we could have a long discussion about it, but I'm a journalist. I don't think it's a place for it, but possibly if you attended a class on it, you might get in a debate with the professor and see what their data shows and whether it's a matter of scholarly dispute. I mean, there's a lot of books on both sides, or whether it's as, I'm not aware of a lot of scholarly, accepted books that advocate that the earth is flat. So I would say this is a matter of scholarly debate.
There was till Galileo came along.
Okay. Well, anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. And yeah, just to close it, yes, I think advocating for black-only dormitories is a moral equivalent of bloodletting, lobotomies, and flat earth theory. I think it's evil, it's wrong, and has no place in American education.
Hi. Thanks for coming out. We really appreciate it. Both of my grandparents went into the hospital with COVID like a year ago, last May, and they were doing fine, like getting better with everything off, like whatever. They were both getting better. They were both feeling better, expressed to my family that they were feeling better, until they were put on remdesivir, which was supported by Tony Fauci, and then they both died.
Yep.
I also had a friend last night who passed away from the vaccine due to heart failure.
Yep.
He's 19 years old. Is there anything that anyone is doing, your team or anyone that you know, to bring Tony Fauci to justice?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, I mean, I hope, and thank you for the journalist that's there. And by the way, I correct myself. Galileo did not posit that the earth was not flat. He posited the heliocentric theory of the earth. And so I was mistaken by saying that. But let me just ask a question for everyone here in the room. How many of you know someone that had a very serious reaction to the vaccine to the point of irreversible health damage? Raise your hand. Okay, so about half the hands are up. If this is true, and this happens everywhere I go to every single audience, then the CDC is not just lying, it's the greatest cover-up in modern American medical history. Because they say it's 1 in a million. And every single room I go to, hands go up. So either everyone's lying and they're in on its mass conspiracy theory, or there's something here that people really are ignoring intentionally. So look, Anthony Fauci should be in prison for what he has done. He's a liar. He's an unbelievably sinister person, and there's not enough being done. And the new Congress, whoever ends up controlling it, priority number 1 needs to make sure Anthony Fauci gets held to justice. And I'm very sorry to hear about the remdesivir encounters. The pushing of remdesivir is nothing more than expensive poison on an entire population that did not need it. Meanwhile, any conversation around ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, vitamin D levels, intravenous therapy, potential ozone intervention, baby aspirin was suppressed from the top levels of our medical authorities. And so I'm going to make it a top priority to try to hold Anthony Fauci accountable, and I encourage all of you to do the same. Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Kirk, my name is Sam. Do I have permission to record your answer?
Yeah, we're live streaming, so.
Okay, cool. I know that you and other conservative speakers have spoken at length about left-leaning universities and colleges, and I agree with you to that point about how toxic it can be. My question is there any blame to be placed on students who are coming into colleges without any moral ideals, without any political ideals? And if there is blame, whose fault is it? What's causing this, and what can we do about it?
There's a little blame on students, but you can't totally blame an 18-year-old for not having a certain grasp of a moral framework. I mean, I put the blame on the parents, for not teaching morals or ethics or, proper civics or history. And also, it's not just colleges, it's high schools now, it's elementary schools, it's grade schools. And so I just say to parents all the time, you have to make it your full-time job to make sure your children shares some form of values of your own. And obviously, there might be some differences and nuances there. But I wouldn't put a lot of blame on the students. A lot of kids are 18, they do what they're told, they really haven't thought that deeply yet. That's not an accusation or criticism, it's just the way it is. I put it more on the educational system and parents not properly doing their job.
I agree with you on that.
God bless you, man. Thank you.
Hi, Charlie, thank you for coming. I'm a sophomore here at FSU, but I'm from Massachusetts and spent my last 2 years of high school during kind of Massachusetts restrictions on the from the coronavirus. I watched how incredibly detrimental it was to my community's mental health, and I really appreciate what you said about America's response to COVID and everything that came with it.
Thank you.
Why do you think America is not more focused on those issues as opposed to COVID deaths? Like, why is the CDC so focused on coronavirus deaths as opposed to the increasing amount of suicides, obesity, alcohol, everything you mentioned? Why do you think that COVID is the focus instead of everything that was detrimental to mental health during that period of time?
Yeah, I mean, look, no one gets more powerful talking about suicide. No one does. You get a lot more powerful talking about an invisible contagion that could be spread at any moment. You got to wear a mask, got to take a vaccine, got to lock down society, destroy small businesses. Pfizer makes $100 billion. A lot of people get wealthy and powerful off of that. I hate to be that sinister or cruel, but if our leaders cared about us, if our leaders really cared, they'd be talking about the 90 to 100,000 fentanyl overdose deaths that happen every single year in our country, sponsored by the Chinese Communist Party, trafficked in by the Sinaloa cartel across the southern border, of which I bet half of this room knows someone in their life that has suffered from a fentanyl overdose in one way, shape, or form. And they're now doing it in form of candy, where kids are getting fentanyl-laced candy, and it's killing kids all across the country. But the CDC is more worried about making sure you have your 7th booster, of which they say has now been tested on 8 mice, not humans. All you guys should know that, by the way. If you get your booster, it's tested on mice, not humans. And they admit that it doesn't even stop transmission. What are we doing here? Well, what happens is we have an entire country that's controlled by a pharma industry that does not care about the well-being or the interests of young people. A young person, the leading cause of death for a young person is either drug overdose or suicide. That should just be a fire alarm for our society. Our leaders should just say, time out, what are we doing here? There is a risk in everything. There's a risk you might get the flu tonight, you might get a cold, you might get food poisoning. Saying there's no risk is insane. And you know what's so amazing? Is that we told the generation of students that now live in total fear, that are 8, 9, and 10 years old, that there might be an invisible virus around the corner that might kill you, even though, statistically, that they're in more danger in the car being a passenger to and from school every single day than COVID ever was for them. And so, look, a fearful population is easier to control. A fearful population allows tyrants to be able to do what they wish with a population. A population that cares about liberty and is courageous is a tyrant's worst nightmare. God bless you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Charlie. My name is Jonathan Ramirez. I happen to be a conservative. I went to 3 Trump rallies. I'm very serious about my stance on politics and supporting people who voice the same principles that I agree with. Despite me being a conservative, I do happen to be pro-choice. How do you feel on the matter, and where as a nation we can come together to agree on something sensible?
Sure. Well, I'll just ask you, when do you think human life begins?
Me personally, when I feel like it begins with the heartbeat, sir.
Okay, so you would a 6-week ban is okay then?
I'm pro-choice with exceptions. No woman, I don't feel like if a woman is due to have a child next week that she could choose to abort the child. That's not decency. That's not decent.
Okay, so but why a heartbeat? Like, what's the reason for that?
Why a heartbeat?
Yeah, like, so do you think we should not allow abortions right around 6 weeks? I'm just trying to
However,
understand.
I feel like 6 weeks is slightly too early, only because, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not a gynecologist, but that means that week 6, that meant missed her period by 3 weeks, give or take, and that's already, then it's too late.
Potentially, right, but there's a heartbeat around 6 weeks. So,
Correct.
So just to play it out, that would be a termination of human life, right?
Correct.
Right, so why do we have murder laws then?
You ask, why do we have murder laws?
Yeah, because that'd be murdering a kid, right? If it's a human life, by your own estimation.
Correct.
So,
You stumped me there. I'm not gonna lie, you did stump me there. I contradict myself where I stand with the matter. That's why I'm asking more or less what's your take on it.
Yeah, so my take is this: life begins at conception, and when life is formed in the womb, and deoxyribonucleic acid is created, a new being comes into formation, and that being is still growing. It's still on its process, but we as human beings tend to have size, level of development, environmental, and degree of dependency privilege. We think just because we're bigger and stronger and no longer in a womb, we have a moral right to do whatever we want to those that are still in the womb. And the toughest questions are the ones when we ask, what does it have to do with me? And is it worthy of protecting those that can't protect themselves? And so to be consistent, we say that's when human life begins. And just because the being is small, just because the being is in a womb, doesn't mean that we have a moral right to obliterate it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
I think you're actually pro-life.
I am. I just think, of personal situations and,
That's understandable.
things of that matter.
But let's play that out just for a second. Situational ethics, for example, if a family is going bankrupt because the 4-year-old is eating too much food, you can't kill the 4-year-old to be able to reduce the family budget, right?
Correct. If I have the time, I will say for one reason that I do happen to be pro-choice. A lot of people that is pro-life feels like it is an extremity for women that is already on the system to continue to have more kids.
I hear you.
To be given more funds. So with the same notion, I feel like it's like having your cake and eating it too. If you don't want women to be able to have the option at all to get an abortion, but feels like they shouldn't continue to get more welfare, that means that child being brought into the world is going to not be brought up to the same measures.
I think you're coming at it from a good perspective. That I reject kind of situational Malthusian ethics in that regard, in the sense that if it just makes your life easier, it doesn't mean you can commit an injustice against another human being. The same goes for arson or robbery or whatever it might be. But I will agree that we have to make it easier to adopt kids in America. There's 2 million families right now on the adoption waiting list, and there's a million abortions every single year. So the idea of an unwanted pregnancy is statistically untrue. And I believe that churches and communities, and yes, even at times city and state and local governments, need to step up and say, okay, we want Roe repealed, but we have to make sure that families and parents and moms have the support that they need. And I'll say one final thing, I think you agree. To the cowardly men that impregnate women and disappear, shame on you, and you're a big part of this problem.
100% correct.
God bless you. Thank you.
Charlie, you spoke about the economic hardship that a lot of young Americans are facing.
Yeah.
What can conservatives do to make a difference on that? Like, how can we modify our national economy to relieve that suffering? I mean, that's very real.
Yeah, I mean, this is what's so frustrating, right, is that we're kind of under the tyranny of academics right now. So just a couple of very simple things. We got to get energy independent again. It's very simple. We got to drill, baby, drill far, drill wide, and tell Greta Thunberg to get the heck out of our national discourse and start actually understanding how energy policy impacts every single person in this room, okay? We got to bring down the price of oil. We got to tell OPEC to go shove it. We have to go exporting oil again. You got to get oil beneath $40 a barrel quickly. Now, that impacts everything. Let me just say, that lowers the cost of food because you got to transport it, the cost of transportation. The second thing, and these are very agreed upon things, second thing is we have to go after inflation with a sword, right? We have got to go through intentional monetary policies that cool the quantitative easing of the last 15 years. You got a follow-up?
No, I was just going to say, do you think that it's sort of the academic and media elite that put us in this situation to begin with? It was their policies and their philosophy, their propaganda that made it so that our national economy became over-financialized and it ate out the real economy.
Yeah, I mean, it also kind of, there's a couple things that happened in the 1990s. We allowed China into the World Trade Organization. We had NAFTA. We repealed Glass-Steagall, which never should have happened, amongst other things. And then 9/11 happened. We lowered interest rates. As soon as Greenspan did that, as soon as we set the precedent that there's any sort of economic misery, any sort of economic hardship, we could just kind of turn the lever on cheap money. It set this 20-year cycle that we're still living through right now with all that other nonsense of the deindustrialization of the American economy, of the hyper-financialization, as you say, led to 08. And then what was our immediate reaction to 08? It wasn't just financial and fiscal stimulus, it was then monetary stimulus, is that we're going to lower rates unrealistic. And so then what ends up happening? COVID happens, and our reaction to COVID, got to go down to record low rates. Well, there is a price of doing a 20-year sugar high. It's unsustainable. And so we've been on a 20-year monetary sugar high, not caring about the next generation, not caring about your purchasing power, couldn't care less about any of it. And so the result is what we're living through right now, which is you have hyperinflation and almost very dangerously low economic growth and a tumbling stock market. Yeah, you're living through crashflation, basically, even worse than stagflation. And so if I was head of the Federal Reserve, I mean, the only way to say is that we're going to have to go through an intentional 6-month recession to get this solved. There is no other way to do it because you've created this ridiculous, unrealistic circumstance. But Wall Street doesn't like that. Americans don't like that. So basically, here's what's going to happen. My prediction is that we are now going to be told by our elites we have to get used to 8 to 10% inflation for the next decade. It's the only way to do this. Unless you're willing to tighten the belt, the new normal will be 8 to 10% inflation, and you're just going to have to get used to it.
That's catastrophic.
Of course it is. That's the agenda, to reset the currency, allow the globalists into our system, to destroy the American dollar by other means. That's my prediction. You're going to see a labor market collapse in March. Mark my words. You're going to see unemployment go to 4 or 5%, and then you have a crash stock market, hyperinflation, just in time to try to blame the Republicans.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks. All right, and if you guys disagree, happy to come up. Okay. We'll take a couple more. Yep.
Hey there, Mr. Kirk. I'm David May. I'm 17. I'm a junior in high school here in Tallahassee. It is a great honor to be here and be able to speak to you. I'm a huge fan. And so I don't know if you watched the Kemp-Abrams debate Sunday night.
I didn't. I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest Kemp fan, but he's better than Stacey Abrams for sure. But.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I watched parts of it. So Abrams attacked the election integrity of Georgia, which is currently experiencing record voting, especially in early voting. And Kemp responded that it's easier to vote, harder to cheat.
Yep.
So my question is, especially with how the mainstream media is now mad at DeSantis here in Florida for allowing some leeway in the counties affected by Hurricane Ian, how can we, in a debate with just ordinary people, refute those claims that particularly red states are somehow manipulating votes and manipulating populations to turn the election in their favor?
Yeah, I just find it hilarious because, you know, we just spent the last year and a half talking about election integrity and being called election deniers and misinformation spreaders. And now they're talking about how voting is not accessible enough and how elections are being manipulated. And we're like, oh, yeah, that's perfectly normal. You're allowed to say, like, which one is it exactly? And so, look, here's the thing. You just got to stay factual on this. Again, I'm not the world's biggest Governor Kemp fan. I could tell you why, but I think he's obviously better than Stacey Abrams. And I say this in my own personal capacity, not on behalf of Turning Point when I say that. But I just want to reemphasize, when it comes to this the voting in Georgia, they have voting month now. It's easier than ever to vote. If you don't have time to vote in Georgia, I don't know what you're doing, okay? They have precincts, they have mail-in balloting, they have I still think it's too much time, and it's so open to it. And so look, here's the issue. In Georgia in 2018, these are approximation of numbers, right? There were 247,000 mail-in ballots, okay? In 2020, there were 1.2 million. Those numbers about right? Yeah, 1.2 million. So if you think that when you increase mail-in ballots by nearly 5 times, that there's not going to be some sort of spillover or overflow, mule operation, whatever you want, I mean, it's just silly to make that argument. So look, I support the voter integrity reform measures. And the final thing I'll say about this with Stacey Abrams, it always just makes me laugh. She still has not admitted she lost the 2018 governor's race, okay? So don't give me this whole thing about election deniers. Stacey Abrams still goes around being like, I'm the duly elected governor of Georgia from 2018. Why hasn't her house been raided by the FBI?
She's part of the...
She's part of the regime. Got to get some more questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kirk.
Appreciate it.
Hi, Mr. Kirk. I'm a freshman here at Florida State University, and I am grateful and humbled to be here. And I have looked up to you for many years, and as well as other people like Jack Posobiec and similar people. So I'm grateful for all that you have done for us. And I would like to ask you a question. I actually wrote many questions, but this was the one that I thought was the best. So let me pull it up here. While I agree with having a limited government and believe that we should have that in the long run, wouldn't a limited federal government allow for states to infringe on our constitutional rights, such as the right to life? Do we need to temporarily use big government to protect our God-given rights in godless states like California?
Good question. So thankfully, I don't live in California, but a lot of people do watching on the live stream. Hello, our California people. So I believe in a small but strong government. That's an important part, right? So if you go read the Federalist Papers, of which I encourage all of you to read if you ever want to get ready for bed and fall asleep, they're beautiful. They are. It's just they're written in a type of English that isn't really around, but you could learn so much. You read the Federalist Papers, there was this tension. And by the way, read the Anti-Federalist Papers too. They're just as interesting. That kind of gang of three, John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison, who formed our structure and system of government, in a lot of different ways, they were debating in the open air against the Jeffersonians, and both won, right? And so what they wouldn't really admit is that they took a lot of things to heart from Jefferson's critique of too strong of a centralized government, but basically history vindicated Hamilton, okay? History showed you need some form of a federal government because the Articles of Confederation were a mess, okay?
Absolutely.
The Articles of Confederation, you had no centralized government, you had nothing. And so there was coups, there were rebellions, no one knew how to trade, there was not the strong system of government, all this sort of stuff. And so to answer your question, should we have a federal, is it time to use big government? No, it's not. What it is time, though, is to pass laws that do protect the most basic things. So for example, if I'm a big supporter of pro-life legislation in all 50 states, if you can't protect those people that can't protect themselves, you're not even doing the most basic thing that government should do, okay? Absolutely. And I mean, so you have this insanely sick and twisted thing of events. Let's take the state of Oregon, okay? So in the state of Oregon, you'll have it's an amazing cartoon, right, of a guy that is sniffing cocaine with a straw. Which one do you think is illegal? The straw.
I think the straw is because probably because of all those
that's bogus, the left,
bogus
by the way.
Environmentalism.
Yeah, it's environmentalism over human decency and flourishing. So that's big government gone awry and not even doing its basic things. All right, I got to get some more questions. Thank you, man.
I'm sorry about my misuse of words there.
No, you're great, man.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for being
much. I
involved.
hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Hey, Charlie. Thank you so much for being here. I'm a student here at FSU, and I'm a member of Turning Point.
Awesome.
So it's awesome to see you here. I've been a fan for years. Love to talk to you today. So my question is more about the future. I know no one can tell the future, including me, but in the next 10 to 15 years, I want to be married, and I want to be starting a family. I'm one of 5 kids to 2 loving parents, and who've been married over 20 years, and I'm a strong believer in raising my own family. So, however, like you say, inflation, it's on the rise. It's becoming harder and harder to make and save money. You also talk about how depression is at a high for this generation. And I've noticed that people who are in jobs they don't tend to like or aren't in jobs that they love, they're more likely to have depression or some form of mental health issues. So for me, like some of the careers I'm interested in don't pay the kind of money that I think it would take to support the kind of family I want, especially because I want to have a lot of kids because I'm a family with a lot of kids. So how do you think that I should go about finding a career that I both enjoy and pays the bills so that I can be happy and raise my family, because I think being happy is necessary to emotionally, physically, and mentally support
my family. Let me challenge one of your frameworks. I think it's going to be helpful for you. Don't go do what you're interested in. Do what you're good at. So what's your skill?
Talking, persuasion.
Well, you can make a lot of money talking, because I'm not kidding. If you are good at communication, from a public speaker to a writer, you can make a ton of money. Now, what are you interested in?
Business is a huge interest. I also I like groups like Turning Point or groups where you advocate for something. I'm a huge mental health advocate. I'm huge on that.
You'll figure it out. The point is this: is that I hear kids all the time say that I'm following my heart and my passion. That's a really bad idea. And it's the worst advice. Follow your skill that you don't hate. No, serious. And then you'll, if you don't hate, I'll give you a great example. If I followed my passion, I'd be a college football coach. Seriously. And I love college football more than anything else. And I by the way, I'm not a fan of your coach. I'm just going to be very honest. He's not going to make it. He's not going to bring you to the promised land. I'm telling you right now. It's not going to happen. Mark my words. Just wait. Just wait. Okay? Well, when was the last time you guys went to a bowl game, right? Not a while. What? 2 wins away? Wow. What is it, week 7? Yeah. I'm saying Florida State is, you compare that to Bowden, okay? You guys deserve. You guys should be undefeated, is what you should be. But anyway, I don't know how I even got onto that. I don't mean to insult. But I love college football. A big fan. Now, if Florida beats you guys this year, I think he might be getting the axe. But we'll see. So, but that's not what I'm the best at. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's about you're following your skill. Okay. And following your skill is very important because then other things start to fall into alignment, okay? And make sure you don't hate that skill. And then the final thing is this. You just have to dedicate, if you want to be successful in life, you have to dedicate yourself to hustle and grit. It's very rare to find. Show up the earliest, leave the latest, and complain the least. You do those 3 things, I don't care what you do, you're going to move up because that's very, very hard to find.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you.
Hey, Charlie. My name is Sharon. I'm a mom of 4, and
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for being here. My oldest is actually your age, and my youngest is a junior in high school. Who's right over there. Anyway, my question is, well, first of all 4 have gone through public school, which back in 1999, when we started that, it didn't seem like a bad idea. And actually, we've had many great teachers, and it worked well for us for a long time. But obviously, in recent years, our eyes have been opened, and there's been a lot of going on and agendas pushed within the school system. I'm also the local chapter chair for our Moms for Liberty, so
Awesome.
been on the
Love
forefront.
Moms for Liberty. Great job. Great.
Been on the forefront of trying to fight our district, who has been one of the ones, defying the governor and our state laws. So my question for you is around school choice. I see that Arizona just this year voted to have a statewide school choice system.
It's really good.
And actually, I've been feeling with the frustration locally that maybe it's a better idea to put energy and time into supporting, getting behind, advocating for a statewide school choice system in Florida.
Yes. So the issue with your Florida education is you guys have a very tricky funding model, right? So if I understand correctly, every school district gets appropriated the same amount of tax dollars. Am I understanding that correctly?
Per student is how I understand it.
Yes, that's right. So
Yeah,
that's
okay,
correct.
okay.
So it gets funded by student. That is very unusual, right? So Illinois, it's based all on school district, and it's all sort of messed up. But I'm still a huge school choice advocate. The problem, the only issue is that you're going to have trouble getting it through the legislature because there's a lot of these deals that have been made and relationships and infrastructure that's built there. And so I would start small. So Arizona just passed the best school choice legislation in the country. Took 20 years to get there of small incremental work. It's so good in Arizona. Any parent can send their tax dollars to any school of their choosing at any time, regardless of circumstance. I want that school, I want that private school, that charter school, it's full choice. It's awesome.
Yes.
And so if a Hispanic family in the west side of Phoenix who's just really struggling economically, doesn't like the local school, they could pull the trigger and get their kid to a successful school. If they don't like CRT, the wokeism, the pornography in their school, boom, they can move it right out, right?
Yeah.
And so I would encourage you guys to entertain that. I'm not a policy wonk on this thing, but you guys have a much better school choice system than most other states. And I hate to give credit to him for this, but Jeb Bush did a pretty good job actually on schools and for at least getting a charter model. And more broadly and nationally, the Florida charter system inspired so many other states to get involved in it. And Jeb was really kind of the pioneer of that, as much as it pains me to say. So, but I would still argue for school choice. And more than that, I just think the fight also has to be in curriculum standards and all this. And Governor DeSantis deserves such credit for not allowing the CRT nonsense. I know it's still happening and it's going backdoor and all of that. But to set a standard from the state level is so incredibly and critically important.
Absolutely. Very thankful for him and what he's doing on state
He's
level
a courageous leader.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, last question.
Hey, Mr. Charlie, how you doing? First off, go Knowles.
Okay.
I have a question for you, man.
We'll see how it works.
Yes, sir. I'm a junior at Florida State University. I have a question for my sister, who's a campaign manager for District 114. She's
Okay.
younger than me, actually. She's only 20.
Wow.
So she's got here at the House of Representatives. We were wondering, property taxes, insurance, and association dues account for half of property owners' expenses. How much do you think these costs are impacting the rents? You know, besides the fact that inflation has doubled the prices of the housing market as it is right now.
A fair amount. So you're talking about Florida.
Right.
Yeah, and I have to say, you guys, you have it so well in Florida. I was a Florida resident for a couple of years, and now I'm Arizona. I mean, you have no income tax on corporate or personal. You know how rare that is, okay? That in Arizona, we have a 3.8% income tax, and it's all this nonsensical corporate tax. So you got to fund your government somehow, right? So, and if you were to try to find, I'm not a huge opponent of using property taxes if necessary. I think that's probably better than sales tax. And the reason being is that the bigger the property, the more tax. In some ways, it is kind of a little bit more distributed based on income. I'm not a fan of any tax. I wish we could get rid of all of it, right? But the one thing I really don't want to see happen is an increase in the sales tax. I'm really opposed to that. That is a direct tax on working people and on lower middle class families, right?
Yeah.
But I think Florida had a surplus. That am I wrong? A year and a half ago? Is that maybe I'm wrong? But look, a surplus means you're spending too much money.
Yeah,
and so
there was
the next Florida budget needs to cut spending, and instead of trying to find more revenue sources to try to just continue to expand the budget. So not too in the weeds on the policy wonk side of it, but the other part is insurance. And I hate to break it to Floridians, but I am kind of a big believer in flood insurance, and that's kind of a big part of living in Florida. I hate to say it. That shouldn't drive it up too much, though. The bigger drive of rent is inflation, and also a development housing crisis. Don't know how that applies in certain metropolitan areas in Florida. I think that they've actually been pretty pro-growth on this. But at least out west, there's a massive housing crisis because of the environmentalists. They are not allowing new development to happen, so less supply, rent goes up, people moving back in with their parents. It's just it's a downfall disaster. So
yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, guys. Well, I want to thank our incredible Turning Point USA group again. Stay engaged, stay involved. Make sure you are registered to vote, and you vote, and you get your friends to go out and vote as well. Very, very important. We're 19 days out from the election, so make sure you do that. I don't care who you vote for. I'm not here today to tell you who you vote for, but make an informed decision and kind of internalize all this and do with what you want. But the final thing I'll say is this, is that your generation, our generation, is going to be tasked with a lot of responsibility. Take this seriously. Continue to consume the news, ask questions, go to events like this, organize with people that share your values, find the Turning Point USA chapter at your local school, and reject cynicism and apathy and nihilism. Those are terrible things, and I think our best days are truly ahead. Thank you guys who listen to our podcast and follow us. We appreciate it. God bless you guys. Thank you.